This is the story of how I caught my wife getting fucked by her boss in a hotel room she called a meeting. My name is Mike. For 6 years, I thought I knew what stability looked like. Amber and I had built a life together. A good one, or at least it felt that way most days. We were partners. We shared a home, routines, plans for the future. We had our differences, sure, but what couple didn't? On Thursday evenings, our routine rarely changed. Amber would come home from work, kick off her shoes, and start preparing her meals for the next day. She loved being organized like that. It was one of the many things I admired about her. That evening was no different, or so I thought. I was on the couch watching reruns of my favorite sitcom, laughing at the same jokes I'd heard a dozen times before. Amber was in the kitchen, chopping vegetables, humming a tune under her breath. "Do you want me to pack you something for tomorrow?" she called out. Her voice had a lightness to it, almost cheerful. "No, I'll grab something on the go," I replied. She nodded but didn't look back. I noticed how focused she seemed, how she stayed absorbed in her tasks. Lately, she had been like this, distracted, preoccupied. I told myself it was just work. Amber had taken on a new project recently, and she often talked about her team and their deadlines. Josh, her manager, came up a lot in these conversations. Too much, maybe. But I wasn't the type to overthink things like that. Amber had always been outgoing and a natural people person. She got along with everyone, and I'd never had a reason to doubt her intentions. Still, there was something different about her lately. The way she smiled less, the way her eyes seemed distant, even when she was sitting right across from me. I wanted to say something, to ask if everything was okay, but the words stuck in my throat. What if it really was just work stress? The last thing I wanted was to sound accusatory or insecure. After dinner, Amber disappeared into the bathroom for her nightly shower. That was when I noticed it. Her phone, sitting on the coffee table. It vibrated once, then again. The screen lit up, casting a faint glow across the room. I didn't mean to look. It was instinctive. The way my eyes flicked to the screen, there was a name. Josh, work. A small, harmless preview of the message appeared, but I didn't catch all the words before the screen dimmed again. I stared at the phone for a moment, feeling an unexpected pang of unease. It wasn't like Amber to leave her phone behind. Lately, she had been keeping it with her constantly, even taking it to the bathroom. I shook my head, telling myself I was being ridiculous. It was probably just a work message. But the phone vibrated again, and I didn't touch it. I sat there, pretending to watch TV. But my focus was entirely on that small device. What could be so urgent at this hour? The bathroom door opened, and Amber stepped out, a towel wrapped around her hair. She glanced at the coffee table and froze for a split second, her eyes darting to her phone. "Sorry," she said quickly, snatching it up. "Work stuff." Her tone was casual, but her movements were rushed, almost frantic. "No problem," I said, forcing a smile. Amber smiled back, though it didn't quite reach her eyes. She headed to the bedroom. Phone in hand, I sat there, feeling a strange weight settle over me. The next day, I couldn't shake the unease from the night before. Amber left for work as usual, kissing me on the cheek and telling me she'd be home late because of a meeting. It sounded normal enough, but something about her tone made my chest tighten. I spent most of the day trying to convince myself that everything was fine. Amber was my wife, the woman I had built my life with. Why would I question her now? But by lunchtime, my curiosity got the better of me. I started researching ways to access phone messages remotely. It felt wrong, like a betrayal of trust, but I couldn't stop myself. Over the next few days, I worked carefully to set up a program that would give me access to Amber's messages. It wasn't easy, but I told myself it was necessary. I just needed to know. When the program finally worked, I hesitated before opening it. Part of me didn't want to see what was there. What if it was nothing? What if it was something? I scrolled through her conversations, feeling a mix of relief and guilt as I saw mundane chats with friends and family. But then I found her thread with Josh. The messages started innocently enough. Discussions about work deadlines, scheduling meetings, things like that. But as I scrolled further back, the tone began to change. "Josh, you've been amazing this week. Couldn't have done it without you, Amber. Thank you." "That means a lot." "Josh, can't wait for Friday, Amber. Same here." My chest tightened. It wasn't explicit, but there was something about the way they spoke to each other that didn't sit right with me. Over the next few days, I tried to act like everything was normal, but inside, I was restless. The messages I had read weren't enough to confirm anything, but they weren't innocent either. My mind kept replaying their words. Couldn't have done it without you. Can't wait for Friday. I wanted to confront Amber, but I knew I needed more. If I brought this up now, she could easily brush it off as harmless work banter, and maybe it was. But what if it wasn't? I told myself. I was being cautious, but deep down I knew I was stalling. I wasn't ready to face what I might find. Amber, on the other hand, seemed completely at ease. If she suspected anything, she didn't show it. She was her usual self, chatty during dinner, focused on her meal prep, and glued to her phone when she wasn't busy. I started paying closer attention to her behavior. Little things stood out. She laughed at her messages more often, and her responses were quick, almost eager, and she started dressing a bit differently, too. Her usual casual outfits were replaced with skirts and blouses that looked a little too polished for her office's laid-back dress code. You look nice, I said one morning as she adjusted her earrings in the mirror. Thanks, she replied, smiling at me through the reflection. Big meeting today. She kissed me on the cheek before grabbing her bag and heading out the door. I watched her leave, a nagging feeling twisting in my chest. By the time she came home that evening, I'd convinced myself to check her messages again. The program I had set up worked silently in the background, syncing her text history to my laptop. When I opened the app, my hands trembled. Part of me hoped I wouldn't find anything, but another part of me needed answers. The thread with Josh was still there. I scrolled through the recent messages, reading each one carefully. Josh. Can we talk about Friday? Amber. Sure, what's up? Josh, just making sure we're on the same page. Amber. Of course, we're good. There wasn't much context, but the tone was casual and familiar. Too familiar. I stared at the screen, trying to piece it together. What was happening on Friday? Amber hadn't mentioned any plans, at least not to me. The days dragged on as Friday approached. Amber seemed excited, her mood lighter than it had been in weeks. She hummed while she cooked, tapped her fingers on the counter to some tune in her head. What's got you in such a good mood? I asked one evening, hoping to catch her off guard. Nothing special, she said with a shrug. Just feeling good, I guess. I nodded, pretending to accept her answer, but my suspicions grew. On Friday morning, Amber left the house earlier than usual. She kissed me goodbye, telling me she had an all-day meeting and might not be home until late. Don't wait up, she said with a playful smile. As soon as she was gone, I opened the app to check her messages. Josh's name was at the top of the list. Josh. See you soon, can't wait, Amber. Me too, I clenched my fists, my mind racing. What were they planning? Where were they meeting? I needed to know. Amber had left her laptop at home, and I decided to check her calendar. It was something I had never done before, but I justified it to myself. I had a right to know the truth. Her calendar was mostly filled with work meetings, but Friday was different. There was a single entry marked private, no details, no location, just that word. I stared at the screen, frustration boiling inside me. I decided to track her phone's location. It was a feature we had set up years ago for emergencies, though we rarely used it. I opened the app, my heart pounding. Amber's location pinged at a hotel downtown. My chest tightened as I stared at the map. Why would she be at a hotel? A tiny blue dot on the map stared back at me, blinking steadily, mocking my disbelief. Amber was at a hotel. It was the middle of the day on a Friday. She was supposed to be at work, drowning in meetings and deadlines, not here. My mind scrambled for an explanation. Maybe it was an off-site meeting. Maybe her team had rented a conference room for the day. It wasn't uncommon for companies to do that, right? But even as I tried to convince myself, the messages with Josh replayed in my mind. Their easy familiarity, the anticipation in their words. It didn't match the image of a professional meeting. I spent the next hour pacing the living room, the map app still open on my phone. I wanted to drive downtown, march into that hotel, and demand answers. But what if I was wrong? What if this was all just a misunderstanding? I stared out the window, watching the neighbor's dog chase a bird across their yard. The absurd normalcy of it made my chest tighten. Somewhere out there, Amber was living a version of her life I wasn't a part of, and I didn't know how to bridge the gap. By early afternoon, I couldn't sit still any longer, and I grabbed my jacket and keys, telling myself I was just going to look. No accusations, no confrontations, just answers. The drive downtown felt like a blur. The city buzzed with its usual energy. Pedestrians hurried across crosswalks. Delivery trucks idled at red lights, and a street musician strummed a guitar on the corner. It all felt surreal, as if I were moving through a movie set rather than my own life. I parked a block away from the hotel, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles turned white. The building loomed ahead, a sleek high-rise with mirrored windows that reflected the bright afternoon sun. I sat in the car for a few minutes, debating my next move. What was I even going to do? Walk in and ask for Amber? Demand to know if she was with someone? Before I could second-guess myself any further, my phone buzzed. It was a new message notification. From Amber. Hey, meeting ran late. Grabbing a quick coffee with the team before heading back. Don't wait up for me. My grip on the phone tightened. Coffee with the team. Was she lying to me in real time? I looked back at the hotel and made my decision. Inside, the lobby was spacious and modern, with marble floors and sleek furniture. A concierge stood behind the front desk, smiling politely as I entered. Can I help you, sir? No, just waiting for someone, I mumbled, avoiding eye contact. I wandered to the seating area, pretending to check my phone while my eyes scanned the room. A group of business people sat at a nearby table, their laptops open, deep in conversation. An older couple checked in at the desk, their suitcases standing neatly beside them, no sign of Amber. I felt a wave of relief and doubt. Maybe I had been wrong after all. Maybe she really was meeting her team for coffee somewhere else. But then I saw him, Josh. I recognized him from the photos Amber had shown me. The same confident posture, the sharp suit, the perfectly styled hair. He stepped out of the elevator, glancing around the lobby as if looking for someone, and then he smiled. Amber appeared a moment later, walking toward him. She wasn't dressed like she was coming from a business meeting. Her blouse was unbuttoned just enough to hint at something more, and her heels clicked against the floor with a confidence that made my stomach churn. Josh said something to her, and she laughed, her hand brushing his arm in a way that felt too intimate, too practiced. I froze, my feet rooted to the floor. Every muscle in my body screamed for me to do something, but I couldn't move, I couldn't think. They headed for the hotel's restaurant, disappearing behind the frosted glass doors. I stumbled back to the seating area, sinking into a chair as the reality of what I'd seen crashed over me. My mind was a storm of anger, betrayal, and disbelief. I pulled out my phone, opening the tracking app again. Amber's location was still pinging at the hotel, a cold reminder of what I'd just witnessed. My hands shook as I opened the message thread with her. Hope the meeting is going well, I typed, my thumb hovering over the send button. I hesitated. What was I even trying to accomplish? Did I want her to lie to me again? Did I need more proof? My chest felt tight, like I couldn't catch my breath. I closed the app without sending the message and shoved my phone back into my pocket. The drive home was a blur. I replayed the scene in my mind over and over, searching for any detail that could change what I'd seen. But there was no denying it. Amber had lied to me. She was here with him, not for work, not for coffee, but for something else entirely. When I got home, I sat in the kitchen staring at the empty table. The house felt different now, like a stranger's place. Every photo on the wall, every piece of furniture we'd picked out together felt like a lie. I opened my laptop and pulled up the messages again. If I was going to confront her, I needed evidence. I took screenshots of everything, the messages, the tracking history, even the calendar entry marked private. Hours passed as I sat there in silence, the weight of what I'd discovered pressing down on me. The sun dipped below the horizon, casting long shadows across the room. Finally, I heard the sound of Amber's car pulling into the driveway. The familiar hum of Amber's car engine sent a shiver through me. I sat frozen in the kitchen, my hands gripping the edge of the table as I listened to the car door slam and her heels clicking up the driveway. Each step felt like a countdown to the moment I'd have to face her. The front door creaked open and Amber called out, her voice bright, almost cheerful. Hey, I'm home. I swallowed hard, trying to steady my breathing. My mind raced with a dozen conflicting thoughts. Should I confront her now? Should I wait, gather more proof? She walked into the kitchen, her bag slung over one shoulder, a takeaway coffee cup in her hand. She looked normal, relaxed, happy, even. "How was your day?" she asked, setting the cup on the counter. I forced a smile, my mouth dry. "It was fine. Busy, you know." She nodded, leaning against the counter as she scrolled through her phone. For a moment, it was like nothing had changed, like everything was still normal. But I couldn't unsee what I had witnessed. Her laugh in the hotel lobby, the way she touched Josh's arm, the ease in their movements. It all replayed in my mind like a broken record. Amber glanced up at me, her brow furrowing slightly. "You okay? You seem quiet." I hesitated, the words clawing at my throat. This was it. The moment I could rip the bandage off and demand the truth. But instead, I shook my head. "Yeah, I'm just tired." Her expression softened, and she walked over, placing a hand on my shoulder. "You've been working so hard lately. You should take a break, you know? Maybe we can do something together this weekend." The warmth in her voice was almost enough to convince me that I was imagining things, that everything I had seen and read was just a misunderstanding. Almost, "Yeah, maybe," I said quietly. She kissed me on the forehead before heading to the bedroom, her heels clicking softly against the floor. As soon as she was out of sight, I exhaled sharply, my hands trembling. I pulled out my phone, staring at the screenshots I had taken earlier. They felt like a weight in my pocket, a silent accusation I wasn't ready to voice. That night, I barely slept. I lay awake, staring at the ceiling, listening to Amber's steady breathing beside me. The darkness felt suffocating, pressing down on me as I wrestled with my thoughts. What if I was wrong? What if confronting her ruined everything? But what if I was right? The next morning, Amber was up early, moving around the house with her usual energy. She hummed as she made coffee, her hair pulled into a loose bun. "I've got a busy day ahead," she said, glancing at me over her shoulder. "Another meeting?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "Yeah, and some follow-ups with clients. It's going to be non-stop." She grabbed her phone and bag, leaning down to kiss me on the cheek. "Don't forget, we're still on for dinner tomorrow night, okay?" I nodded, watching as she walked out the door, her heels clicking against the pavement. As soon as she was gone, I opened the tracking app again. Her location pinged at her office, this time, and I felt a small flicker of relief. Maybe today would be normal. Maybe she really was just busy with work. But then a message notification appeared on the program I had set up. "Josh, can't stop thinking about yesterday, Amber." Same, it was perfect. My stomach twisted. Perfect. What was she talking about? The hotel, their lunch, something more. I scrolled through the thread, my heart pounding with every word. "Josh, when can we make it happen again, Amber?" "Soon, I hope." I clenched my fists, anger and hurt bubbling up inside me. This wasn't just casual flirting. This was something real, something deliberate. I needed more. If I was going to confront her, I needed undeniable proof. Over the next few days, I watched closely, both in person and through the messages. Amber's behavior didn't change much. She was still attentive at home, still cheerful during our conversations. But the messages told a different story. Josh suggested another meeting, this time at a restaurant across town. Amber agreed, her excitement clear in every reply. The night of their planned dinner, I told Amber I had to work late. She seemed relieved, even grateful. "That's fine," she said, smiling. I'll just grab something on my own." As soon as she left, I followed her. My hands gripped the steering wheel tightly as I trailed her car through the city streets. She drove to the restaurant Josh had mentioned in their messages, parking in a spot near the entrance. I parked a block away, watching as she stepped out of the car. She was dressed to impress, her makeup flawless, her heels clicking confidently against the pavement. Josh was waiting for her outside, a bottle of wine in hand. He smiled as she approached, leaning in to kiss her cheek. My breath caught in my throat. I watched as they walked inside together, their bodies close, their laughter carrying in the cool evening air. I stayed in the car, my mind racing. Part of me wanted to storm in, to demand answers right then and there. But another part of me, the part that still held on to hope, wanted to wait. I needed to see how far this would go. I stayed in the car, gripping the steering wheel so hard that my knuckles turned white. The sight of Amber walking into that restaurant with Josh was like a punch to the gut. Every step she took seemed calculated, deliberate, confident. This wasn't a casual dinner between colleagues. It was something much more. The minutes stretched into what felt like hours as I sat there, staring at the restaurant's glowing sign. My chest felt tight, like I couldn't catch my breath. I checked my phone, scrolling through their message thread again, as if the words might somehow change, but they didn't. Can't stop thinking about you. Yesterday was perfect. When can we make it happen again? The words were burned into my brain, each one a dagger twisting deeper. Finally, I couldn't take it anymore. I stepped out of the car, pulling my jacket tighter against the chilly evening air. The city hummed around me, cars honking in the distance, people laughing as they passed on the sidewalk. But all I could focus on was the restaurant door. I approached slowly, my heart pounding in my chest. Through the large glass windows, I could see them. Amber and Josh were seated at a corner table, tucked away from the main dining area. Candles flickered between them, casting soft shadows across their faces. Amber was laughing, her hand lightly brushing Josh's as he said something I couldn't hear. She looked radiant, like she hadn't a care in the world. I clenched my fists, the urge to burst in and confront them almost overwhelming. But I stopped myself. If I went in now, all I'd have were accusations. I needed more. I turned away from the door, my mind racing. There was a coffee shop across the street, its windows fogged from the warmth inside. I went in, ordered a black coffee, and found a seat near the window where I could keep an eye on the restaurant. The barista gave me a strange look as I sat there, staring out at the street like a man possessed, but I didn't care. My focus was on Amber and Josh. They stayed at the restaurant for over an hour, talking and laughing as if they were the only two people in the world. Every time Amber smiled at him, every time she leaned in closer, it felt like another piece of me was breaking. When they finally got up to leave, I tensed, my eyes following their every move. Josh held the door open for her and she stepped out, her laughter carrying on the breeze. I watched as they walked to her car, their movements unhurried, casual. Josh said something and Amber laughed again, her hand resting briefly on his arm. Then she opened the car door, sliding into the driver's seat. Josh leaned down, his face close to hers, and for a moment, I thought he was going to kiss her. But instead, he stepped back, watching as she pulled out of the parking lot. I waited until Josh disappeared into his own car before I left the coffee shop, my mind spinning with what I'd just seen. Amber came home late that night, her excuse ready. Sorry, I stayed back to finish some reports, she said, kicking off her heels by the door. Long day? I asked, my voice steady, almost casual. Yeah, but productive. She smiled at me, her expression open and sincere, as if she hadn't just been on a romantic dinner with another man. I nodded, pretending to accept her words, but inside I was screaming. Over the next few days, I kept up the act. I smiled when she smiled, laughed when she laughed, played the part of the trusting husband. But every moment we spent together felt like a lie. The messages between her and Josh continued, each one cutting deeper than the last. I miss you already. Can't wait until next time. You're all I think about. I began to notice more things, subtle changes in her routine, little details that hadn't stood out before. She spent more time getting ready in the mornings, her makeup more polished, her outfits more stylish. She was glued to her phone, always smiling at something on the screen. Who are you texting? I asked one evening, my voice casual. Just Karen from work, she replied without missing a beat. I nodded, forcing a smile, but my stomach churned. I decided I couldn't wait any longer. I needed definitive proof, something I could confront her with. The messages were damning, but I wanted more. The opportunity came the following week. Amber had mentioned another late meeting, her tone light, almost flippant. Don't wait up, she said with a smile as she grabbed her bag. As soon as she left, I opened the tracking app. Her location pinged at a nearby hotel. My heart sank. I got in the car, driving there as fast as I could without breaking any laws. The hotel was a modest one, not as flashy as the downtown high-rise from before. I parked across the street, watching the entrance like a hawk. Amber's car was already there. I waited, my hands gripping the steering wheel, my mind racing with possibilities. After what felt like an eternity, the lobby door opened, and there she was. She wasn't alone. Josh was with her, his hand resting lightly on her lower back as they walked toward the elevator. I felt like I couldn't breathe. I sat frozen in the car, my mind blank as I watched Amber and Josh disappear into the elevator. The way his hand lingered on her back, the way she smiled up at him, it was all so casual, so natural, like they'd done this 100 times before. My chest felt like it was caving in, the air thick and suffocating. Every part of me wanted to storm into that hotel, to confront them right there, to demand answers. But my feet wouldn't move. My hands stayed clenched on the steering wheel, my knuckles white. I stared at the elevator doors long after they had closed, my thoughts spiraling. How long had this been going on? How many times had she lied to me, smiled at me, kissed me while hiding this? I didn't know how much time had passed when I finally started the car and drove home. The silence in the house felt heavier than ever as I walked through the door. The photos on the walls, the little mementos we'd collected over the years, they all felt like mockery now, reminders of a life that was crumbling before my eyes. I sat at the kitchen table, the laptop in front of me, staring at the screenshots of her messages with Josh. I'd taken pictures of her location, the timestamps, even the receipts from the tracking app. The evidence was all there, undeniable and damning. But as I stared at it, another question gnawed at me. What now confronting her would mean shattering everything we'd built. It would mean admitting that the woman I thought I knew, the life I thought we had, was a lie. Was I ready for that? Hours passed. The sound of Amber's car pulling into the driveway jolted me out of my thoughts. I closed the laptop and stood, my heart pounding as the door opened and she walked in. "Hey," she said, setting her bag down. Her smile was tired but warm, like nothing was wrong, like she hadn't just spent hours at a hotel with another man. "Hey," I replied, my voice calm. "You're still up?" she asked, slipping off her shoes. "Couldn't sleep," I said. "How was your meeting?" She hesitated for the briefest moment, but her expression didn't falter. "It went well, productive, long though." I nodded, watching her closely. She didn't seem nervous. If anything, she looked relieved, like she'd just crossed a finish line. "Glad to hear it," I said. "You must be tired." "Exhausted," she admitted, heading toward the bedroom. "I'm going to crash, Night." "Good night," I said, my voice even. As soon as the door closed behind her, I sat back down at the table, my head in my hands. The confrontation I'd been building up to all week felt impossibly far away now. The next morning, I made a decision. I wasn't going to let this drag on any longer. Amber was in the shower when I walked into the bedroom, the laptop tucked under my arm. I opened it on the bed, scrolling through the screenshots one last time. My hands were steady now, my resolve clear. When she came out of the bathroom, her hair wrapped in a towel, she froze at the sight of me sitting there. "Morning," she said, her voice cautious. "What's going on?" I turned the laptop toward her, the screen displaying the messages with Josh. Her eyes widened, her face paling, as she took a step back. "Mike, I can explain." "Don't," I said, my voice sharp. "Just don't." She stared at me, her hands clutching the edge of her towel. For a moment, the room was silent except for the faint hum of the air conditioner. "How long?" I asked finally, my voice low. Amber opened her mouth, then closed it again, her gaze dropping to the floor. "How long?" I repeated, my chest tightening. "A few months," she whispered. I laughed bitterly, the sound harsh in the quiet room. "Months, months of lying to me, of sneaking around. For what, him?" "It wasn't supposed to happen," she said quickly, her words tumbling over each other. "It started with work. We just clicked, and I didn't mean for it to go this far." "But it did," I said, my voice cold. She looked up at me, her eyes pleading. "Mike, I still love you. This doesn't change that." "Doesn't change that," I snapped, standing. "You've been lying to me for months, Amber. How does that not change everything?" "I made a mistake," she said, tears spilling down her cheeks. "I was lost, and I—" "Don't," I said again, cutting her off. "Don't try to make this about you being lost. You made choices, Amber. You chose him." She reached for me, but I stepped back, the distance between us feeling like a canyon. "I need space," I said, my voice firm. "I can't do this right now." "Mike, please," she begged, her voice breaking. But I turned and walked out of the room, her sobs echoing behind me. The rest of the day passed in a haze. I packed a bag, ignoring her attempts to talk to me, and left the house. I didn't know what the future held. Maybe we'd try to fix things, or maybe this was the end. All I knew is that the trust we'd built, the foundation of our life together, was gone. And no matter what came next, things would never be the same.